Hey guys, it's White Cross, and you have joined me for the fifth and final video in our 999 Advanced Bar series, the 100 ounce bars. If you are new to the channel, I appreciate you stopping by. Hopefully, you've had a chance to go back and watch the other videos in this series. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you once again for spending some time with me here today. I really appreciate it. I like to begin all of my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial analyst. I'm not trying to give you financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience as I've been buying and selling precious metals and rare coins for the last 3 or 4 decades. If you are new to the channel, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. That way you can see all of our new videos as they are released. It also helps with the algorithm for other people who are trying to find this information on YouTube. And if you're a returning subscriber, I really appreciate you being with me here today. It means a lot to me. So the 999 Advanced Silver Bar series, we started in sizes. We went from 1 ounce, we went from 1 ounce up to the 10 ounce bars. We went from 10 ounces to kilogram bars. We went to 50 ounce bars. That was the last video, and this video is the last in the series. It's the 100 ounce bars. You might ask, what about the 1,000 ounce bars? I don't own any 1,000 ounce bars. We talked in the concept sections of the last 2 or 3 videos the idea of indivisibility, and that goes tenfold for those 1,000 ounce bars. Not only are they an absolute bear to try to pick up and move, and that's one of the drawbacks that silver does actually have. It gets to be quite heavy when you start accumulating it. Those 1,000 ounce bars weigh a ton and they are difficult to move, but they're also difficult to move in the financial sense. You have very few buyers for them, and the buyers that exist for them understand the drawbacks of them and consequently are unlikely to pay you much or if any of a premium for those 1,000 ounce bars. We talked a lot in the concept about the concept of indivisibility in the last couple of videos. These larger bars, say from larger than a kilogram, including the 50 ounces and even these 100 ounce bars, suffer from indivisibility. And I don't want to go deeply into that. We've already talked about it to some extent, but really briefly, indivisibility means that you can't break them down into smaller sizes. You can't sell a part of these larger bars. You have to sell the entire bar. You also have to buy the entire bar. If you are buying at a time when silver is elevated, as it is right now, you are necessarily buying the entire position at that higher price. You can't dollar cost average into it. And buying those larger bars at the higher price means every single ounce in those bars you're paying a premium for, potentially a very high premium. You also are having to sell that entire position when you go to sell. Those are all the issues with indivisibility. This concept that I wanted to talk about on this last of these advanced 999 silver bar videos is kind of the other side of that coin. And that concept is diversification. That's a fancy way of saying putting all of your eggs in one basket. And in this case, it's putting all of your eggs, your financial dollars, the money you have allocated to put into whatever it is that you're trying to buy. You are tying it all up in a bar this size. Now, there are some people out there who have unlimited resources, but I tell you what, that's not me. I don't have endless amounts of money to put into anything. So I have to pick and choose pretty carefully what I'm buying. And when you're talking about a big bar like these 100 ounce bars, let's use our illustrative amount of $20 per ounce. I know that silver has been fluctuating wildly recently, far above that, and it has dipped down below that too. But just for the sake of discussion, let's say that silver is theoretically $20 an ounce. When you're buying a $100 or 100 ounce bar, you are spending $2,000 just on the silver. That doesn't include any kind of premium or any other associated costs with it. That diversification, that tying up all of those resources, means that you are potentially tying up the money that you could be using to put into other things. I don't like to talk about other investments. We're focusing here on physical precious metals, whether you think of that as an investment, of a store of wealth, or just a place to park your money, or a hobby. you are tying up those dollars when you're buying something like this. It means that you don't have any dollars left over to put into something else that could potentially pay you higher returns or simply give you greater satisfaction, whether it's a family vacation or it's another type of investment. When you are sinking the kind of money that's required to buy one of these larger bars, especially at that $20 theoretical price, you are tying up a lot of resources and you have less opportunity for diversification. You're putting all of your eggs into that one basket or all of your dollars into that large silver bar. So indivisibility is the first half of that equation, but diversification is the other half of that equation. And I freely admit that I'm a bit of a hypocrite here, but if you saw the last video, you know that I'm pretty judicious when it comes to buying these larger bars, and I'll talk a little bit about these as we kind of explore these options here. Again, these aren't the only options out there. If you decide that you have the kinds of resources that can go into these larger bars, there are many different options out there from many different makers, but I am sincere when I say that I think these larger bars are really not necessary, and you are probably going to be better off going with 10-ounce bars or even kilogram bars. But let's talk about these. I know they're sexy, I know they're flashy, and I know they're a lot of fun. I bought most of these when I was a younger stacker, and for various reasons, I was able to acquire a pretty good amount of money, and I wanted to diversify, and these seemed like good options at the time. I felt like I had my bases covered with the smaller units. I had plenty of 1-ounce bars, plenty of rounds, plenty of 10-ounce bars. I had a couple kilogram bars. These seemed like they were pretty good options at the time. In hindsight, I probably wouldn't have invested in these if I could have seen kind of the writing on the wall, would have put more money maybe into some other investments rather than these. I've got them now. They're part of my stack. I don't have any intention of exiting these positions, but for the reasons I've talked about, these are really probably not the best idea for the average stacker. Let's talk about them though. This one right here, let's jump right into it, should come as no surprise that this is an Engelhard bar. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I'm a big Johnson Matthey and Engelhard fan. Those are kind of old school popular bars that were around when I was younger, and they are the ones that appeal to me, just like nostalgia makes people buy classic cars or vintage baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever were popular when you were a kid. I'm one of those geeky kids who was interested in precious metals when I was a teenager. Engelhard bars have a warm spot in my heart, so they're something that I pursued. Now, I was offered this in about 2017, and that is the most recent of these bars that I bought. You can see that that goes back 5 or 6 years, and clearly I haven't bought another 100-ounce bar since then for the reasons that I've talked about. This is a 4th series Canadian bar per all Engelhard. And this is probably dates to the late 1970s. A little bit difficult for me to pick these up, but I'll struggle through it. I've said before that I come at bullion from a numismatic perspective. I'm a coin collector going back even further than I am a precious metals hound. So I have always applied the same kind of characteristics that we look for in rare coins to my precious metal stack. I like things that are older. I like things that are a little bit more unusual. I like things that have original surfaces that haven't been cleaned and tampered with. I like things in their original packaging. All of these factors I have applied from my numismatic background, my coin collecting background, to my precious metals background. So when a local dealer had this bar, it automatically piqued my interest. This is exactly the kind of thing that I like. Did I need it? 5 or 6 years ago, silver wasn't anywhere near as expensive as it is now. My records indicate I paid just a little bit below $1,800 for this bar. So that's about $18 an ounce, including the premium. So silver was probably $16 or $17 an ounce at the time, and it seemed like a good idea. 4th series Canadian bar, dates to the late 1970s, had a mintage of about 15,000 pieces. Now, that sounds like a pretty good amount, and for 100-ounce bars, that's a fair amount of silver to have burned through. But Keep in mind that those 9th and 10th series extruded Engelhard bars, those are the bars that have a little bit more finish like the Johnson Matthey bars. They are horizontal and they have Engelhard in kind of a slanted font stamped into the bar. Those are the 9th and 10th series 100-ounce bars from Engelhard, and I believe those are kind of the latest, the last 100-ounce bars that Engelhard made for consumers. They made 300,000 of the 9th series and 375,000 of the 10th series. So this 4th series Canadian at a 15,000 mintage is quite small. I don't know that I knew at the time that it was such a small mintage. I can't recall off the top of my head if all Engelhard was up and operating. Again, I brag about those guys all the time. I think their website is phenomenal. And if they did have a website, I'm sure that I checked and saw what the mintage was. I just can't remember right now. That is a pretty low mintage at 15,000. Again, something that was made in the late 1970s. Who knows how many of these bars still exist today? 100-ounce bars probably don't get melted down that often, but maybe a third or even a half of these bars probably no longer exist because of attrition. We've talked about that over and over again. Just the fact that over time, existing examples suffer from loss, meltings, theft, everything that you can imagine, floods and fires and earthquakes and everything else. The number of surviving bars necessarily reduces over time, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were fewer than 10,000, maybe fewer than 5,000 of these 100-ounce bars left. I think they're kind of cool. Do they command a premium? Sure, probably. It stands to reason that these older bars probably sell for a little bit of a premium, but as these are part of my permanent stack, they probably aren't something that I'm going to get rid of anytime soon. And they're probably not even something that I would rotate out of. I'm pretty satisfied with the bars that I have here, and unless something really spectacular comes along, I'm probably not going to be trading out of any of these bars that you see here. An interesting side note, and I see this mentioned sometimes, but people don't seem to go into detail with it very much. Let's see if I can bring it in here. I'm looking at that symbol there. Some people call that the bull symbol, and I think I'm pretty comfortable calling that a bull too. Do you know what that is? All Engelhard has a pretty good dissertation on this piece, and I'll put a link down below so you can take a look and see what it is. But really briefly, these are alchemy symbols. Alchemy, kind of the precursor to what we think of modern scientists, of modern chemists, the study of chemistry. Alchemy was a medieval art where people were trying to understand the physical world, and alchemists ultimately tried to convert a heavy metal, a heavy, dense, malleable metal, lead, into a heavy, dense, malleable metal that had a lot of value, gold. So among many other things, alchemists were trying to find a way to convert lead into gold. We know now that that's virtually impossible. I suppose it can be under incredibly dangerous scientific conditions, but lead is an element and gold is an element, and you can't really change one from the other. But alchemists were consumed with trying to do that, and they created an entire system, an entire language, all of their own, as they were exploring the beginnings of what we think of as modern science. And those experiments that they often used symbols, in part to try to keep their experiments secret in case their notes got lost. They didn't want their competitors to see anything that they were discovering. They're credited with discovering gunpowder, among other things. So alchemists were involved in all sorts of interesting scientific experiments trying to understand the physical world. And these symbols are alchemy symbols. So that one with the curve on it is actually a symbol for the moon, but that actually had a different meaning as well, and that meaning was silver. The circle with the dot in it is an entirely different symbol, and that symbol means the sun, and that symbol also means gold. When you combine these two symbols together, they mean platinum. So it's perfectly natural that Engelhard would have liked those symbols. They are chemistry, they are precious metals, and they use the combined silver and gold equals platinum kind of as their mascot on these Canadian-produced bars. So there you've got a little bit of history about the Canadian bull logo from Engelhard. And again, I'll put a link down below. So to reiterate, I bought this for about $1,750, $1,800, somewhere in there in 2017. Now let's compare that to some of these other bars that are up here. These are two Johnson Matthey bars. And again, as I've said before, I like the original packaging. Both of these bars have the original box that they came in. Why did I care about that? I mentioned that in the 10-ounce bar video when I was talking about those bars that are still in their original vinyl sleeves. Coming from a numismatic field, I liked original, and that's what the pieces that stuck out to me. When I saw pieces in my dealer's display case or on his back shelf, if they didn't have those original packages, they weren't something that even piqued my interest. I wasn't really interested in looking at them. But when they had stuff that was in the original boxes, I automatically wanted to see them, and I wound up buying these. These are extruded bars or minted bars as opposed to poured bars like these two. When the molten metal was actually poured into a form or a mold, these two were poured. These were actually minted or extruded, where they use silver under really high pressures and then they force the image into the front and also the back here. You can see that back as well. These are big, beefy bars. All of these 100-ounce bars are hard to pick up. I make it look easy, but they are really toe breakers. If you were to drop one of these, they would really do some damage. So I bought these, which date to the late 1980s. And I showed them briefly. I showed this one, I think, in the 50-ounce bar, just as a comparison to a poured bar. Here you can see the difference really easily. The fine finish on these, the stamped images, all the details, as opposed to kind of these rougher, more crude stamped items here. Date to the late 1980s. They have a mintage according to all Engelhard, which does include other mints or other refineries like Johnson Matthey. They indicate there were about 100,000 of these made. So, not a really rare bar, but they are becoming more scarce, especially those in their original packages. These packages are pretty flimsy, these cardboard boxes. And they no longer, for me at least, really hold those silver bars. If I try to pick them up by the edges, there's the possibility those bottoms are going to pop right off. Attrition. If you are given the choice between two items that are exactly identical, one is in its original box, one is not in its original box, everything else is equal. The price, the premium, the condition. Which one are you going to choose? I called that White Cross's choice before, but really you can apply it however you want to apply it. I think most people are going to choose the one in the original box. Worst case scenario, you can always toss that box and it would still be the same bar that the other bar had been. But you have those options. You've got the potential of an exit strategy that may, at some point in the future, offer you more flexibility in terms of higher premiums, or a faster sale, a bigger pool of buyers. So I think it's a good idea to go for those items that are in their original packages if everything else is equal. If you've got to pay a big premium for it, I'm not so sure. But again, I probably wouldn't have bought it anyway if it wasn't in the original box, and I certainly didn't pay a premium for them in their original boxes. I keep my powder dry until I see something that I really like. So I have 3 or 4 of these 100-ounce bars, and I bought them all roughly the same period of time. I bought them in, I think, about 2010. So it's been 12 or 13 or 14 years since I bought these. Interestingly, I paid about $1,800 an ounce for these two Engelhard bars, or rather Johnson Matthey bars, which is almost the same amount that I paid for this Engelhard bar many years later. So you can see how silver fluctuates over time. Even though we had big highs and big lows in the interim, these bars wound up being almost the same price, even though I bought them 6 or 7 years apart. I thought it was an interesting point to make. And again, I've said it many, many times. Nobody can predict the future. Nobody knows what the price of silver or gold is going to be at 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. I'm a big fan of kind of steady, continuous investment. I try to avoid the highs when I can. I try to dollar cost average when I can. But again, these 100-ounce bars don't allow for easy dollar cost averaging. So Interesting combination of these 100-ounce bars in comparison with the Engelhard bar. If I had a choice and I had to get rid of some, I would probably keep the Engelhard because I like the older poured bar style a little bit more. But there's something about these great big Johnson Matthey bars and their original cardboard boxes with matching serial numbers on the outside of the box compared to the bar. Something really cool about that. Johnson Matthey had a really neat, interesting aesthetic. Their style was just really cool, and this still speaks to me to this day. This bar just looks kind of mean, and I like it. Some options of some older bars. This one's even older. So this is that Sheffield Smelting bar that I talked about in the 50-ounce video. If you saw the 50-ounce video, you remember that I talked about this bar. I'll bring this back into the picture really briefly. The one that started the 50-ounce bar search was this bar, and I mentioned that I had gotten this bar from one of my original dealers who is now passed on, and so it has a little bit of a nostalgia feeling to it, a little bit of personal emotional attachment to it. I bought this bar from his own personal stack. He offered it to me because he knew that I was looking for silver, and he just didn't have a lot of stuff to offer me that I was after at the time, and he pulled this out and was like, maybe you'd like this one. And I didn't know anything about Sheffield at the time, and it didn't mean much to me, but I like the shape, I like the form, and I thought I could tell that this was a pretty old bar. And I've run into problems with that before. If you saw the kilogram bar video, you know that I assumed that Dubai Emirates Gold bar was a little bit newer than I thought it was. This one looked pretty old, and my dealer assured me that it was a pretty old bar. I mentioned in the 50-ounce video that Sheffield Smelting was founded in England in 1760, and they've been in the same location in Sheffield, England since 1787. So this is a refinery that goes back hundreds of years. This bar isn't that old. I believe that after I bought this bar, after I bought the 50-ounce bar, I spoke with the people at allengelhard.com and asked for their opinion about how old this was. And they said they thought it was probably dates to the early 1980s. It seems a little bit older than that to me. Recall that I mentioned in the last video that Engelhard was actually bought, that Sheffield was actually bought by Engelhard in 1974, and they didn't sell it till 1984. And we know that Engelhard and Sheffield have co-branded bars. I don't have any of those. If you've got a co-branded Sheffield Engelhard bar, you have my envy. I'm jealous of you. I haven't been able to find one at a good price, so I haven't purchased one. But this bar, to me, seems to predate that Engelhard relationship. It seems like the bar would have been stamped with some kind of indicator saying that it was an Engelhard corporation or something, and this bar doesn't. If you can see the detail on that, I know that's a little bit difficult to read with the glare, but it just talks a little bit about Sheffield. This is called a bathtub bar sometimes. It's called a trough bar. Lots of different names for a loaf bar. It's the only bar that I have that's really this form, and because it's got that sentimental value that I attach with my older dealer who's passed on, this is definitely part of my permanent collection. So even though I paid a little bit of a premium for this bar, I think I bought this right about $1,900, and it seems like it would have been 2009, 2010, somewhere in that period as well. So these bars I've owned for a decade, most of them, with the exception of the Engelhard poured bar over here. Even though I have told you on many occasions I'm not a fan of these larger bars, I can't really see getting rid of them. They are kind of a foundation for my precious metals physical holding, and it would seem a shame for me to get rid of them this time. I don't have any desire to do that, and I probably won't. But as I've said on multiple occasions, and as I'm cautioning you, there is indivisibility involved when you're buying pieces this large, and there's that diversification that we talked about at the beginning of this video. If you're putting all of your financial eggs in this one basket, what are you missing out on? What opportunities are going to come out of nowhere that you're not expecting that you can't pursue because you've got so much money tied up in just one single bar that you can't get rid of very easily, or maybe, like me, you don't want to get rid of. So there's that diversification issue, there's the indivisibility issue, and all the other issues that I talked about with those larger bars. I'm a hypocrite, I understand that. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm not going to tell you that you can't buy these bars. Just go into it with your eyes open and take what I've said as a word of caution. There are kind of unforeseen consequences with bars of this size, and know what you're doing before you jump into bars of this size. So that is a wrap up of the 999 silver bars for advanced stackers video series. There are 5 in the series. If you haven't watched all of them, go back and watch them. I think they're kind of neat to see that progression from 1 ounce all the way up to these beastie 100-ounce bars. We have many videos to come still. If you're watching these out of order, you'll be seeing these in the future. One of my favorite video concepts is coming up soon, and that's Mexican silver. I've talked about before that I like Mexican silver, and we'll go a little bit deeper into the positives and negatives of Mexican silver. If you have any questions about these bars, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. If you have any suggestions on other video ideas that you'd like to see me try to make, leave a comment down below, and I'll check and see if I've got any of the kind of information that would help in the discourse, the discussion of that subject. If you have anything else you'd like to say about the content of these videos, the last videos that I've produced, the future videos, leave a comment down below. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I really appreciate that. Like the video if you found it useful. That's always fun to see. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.